So I'm Nicola Streeten. I'm a graphic novelist and author of Billy, Me and You, which is probably the first graphic memoir published by a mainstream publisher by a British woman. I'm talking today about the seeds of an idea for what I hope to be researching over the next 3 years. Margaret Thatcher was the British Prime Minister from 1979 to 1990, and when she died earlier this year, there was a fantastic flurry of commentary, and I just wanted to read out something from an article by Frank Cottrell Boyce, who is a British screenwriter and novelist. He did Brookside and Coronation Street, and he also wrote the London Olympics opening ceremony. And the reason I want to read this bit out is because it articulates a point I want to make today. This distrust of the state is something which she imported from America. It's not British. The British have many happy memories of state intervention. It was the state that won the war, the state that founded the NHS and gave us free milk when we were little. We have always believed in the possibility of Jerusalem. It's there in Milton, Blake, G.K. Chesterton and Oliver Postgate. There's a thread of purpose that runs through our finest moments. The abolition of the slave trade, the winning of votes for women, the defeat of Hitler. A desire to be not just more prosperous, but better, to be more equal, more sharing, more accepting of difference, to have fun. It's in all the temporary utopias we build for ourselves. The well-run caravan site, the Notting Hill Carnival, the Village Fete and Glastonbury. We are not Sid, we are William Wilberforce and Aneurin Bevan. We are Rosalind Franklin, not caring about not getting her share of the credit for discovering the structure of DNA. We are Tim Berners-Lee, not doing it for the money. Thatcher never understood that. Although she draped herself in the Union flag, Thatcher never seemed really to like or understand this country. My interest is in contemporary British women comics and graphic novels and the activity surrounding it. And my question as one of the questions I'm asking is, how can contemporary British women's comics activity borrow from other cultures and other generations, yet maintain its unique identity? And today I'm going to focus more on the borrowing from other cultures, which is an essential part. What I want to show is how, when we do borrow cultural activity, translates from one culture to another, it doesn't remain the same, and I think sometimes we forget that. And the reason I'm looking at that is because of the popularity of the graphic novel and comics currently in Britain. I quite often hear people saying, oh, we should be like in Belgium, or we should do in Britain like in France, or like in the USA. So there's a constant comparison. And always I think, well, yes, we should borrow, and we have done, but we also need to maintain this. What's happening in the UK is very unique, and I worry about the hierarchy. By trying to be the same as another culture, it's introducing the problem of the hierarchy. My question and my looking at it is pragmatic as well as academic. I always start from the personal. My academic research is informed by and informs the activity. And the reason is because I co-founded with Sarah Lightman, artist, Laydeez to Comics in 2009. And what I'm proposing is that Laydeez to Comics is feminist activism within comics today, and it is actually at the heart of what's happening in the British UK comics community. And what I'm saying is it's a successful model, it's an innovative model, and that brings me back to why I was reading out that Cottrell Boyce paragraph, because it's come from the source of Laydeez to Comics was not for profit. The motivation was it's all based on goodwill and on having fun. So what is Laydeez to Comics? Sarah and myself started it in 2009. It's we were looking for a community that we couldn't quite find. We couldn't quite place ourselves, so we formed it. But the motivation was a curiosity about what other people were doing rather than self-interest. And it was about forming something that would inspire us and be fun. It's about creating a social activity with face-to-face activity with people, because what we were doing as artists was quite isolated, and we were relying for information on the internet, but we think it cannot replace the social contact. The format is sort of loosely based on the art school crit. As you can see, this is Sarah Lightman. And we structure it around 3 presentations from guests. The subject is our interest of what people are talking about rather than the form of structure of the work they're doing. And our interest feeds into that, which is the personal and the autobiographical. Essentially, of essential importance is that Laydeez Do Comics is women-led, but not women only, and we feel this is a crucial aspect of it. We always start our events with a question around everyone, and it ensures that there's a feeling of participation. And of course, Sarah bakes cakes, so again, it's that welcoming that sort of a friendly atmosphere. Oh yeah, so we've become quite popular in the 4 years, and last year I was going to New York, so I thought I would experiment with a pop-up New York Laydeez Do Comics. And I emailed a New York artist who responded in a very polite, friendly email. Unfortunately, I'm not able to do unpaid presentations unless I'm promoting a new book or show, which I'm not doing right now. And I'm not making a judgment about that attitude, because it's very offensive as an artist to be invited to talk for nothing by someone who's salaried. But the essential difference is Laydeez Do Comics is artist-led, it's grassroots, we're doing it for no money, there's no money involved. The reason I'm putting this here is simply an observation that in the 4 years we've been running in the UK, we had never ever been asked by any of our artists about money. There'd always been an assumption that it was unpaid and there was no money involved. And the first person in America I approached instantly the money question. It was assumed that there was a money transaction, so that's what I'm coming back to, this cultural translation. And insignificantly, the 3 artists who did come to present were a British artist who's been living and working in New York, and 2 New York-based artists who had spent a long time in England. Oh yeah. So really, because Laydeez Do Comics has grown so substantially over the past few years, we started with audiences of 20 in London, and now we gather about 80 people. It's made me reflect on why. Why has it caught on? Why has that caught on? What is it about it? And where do we go from here? Where does Sarah and I lead this movement from here? So it's made me start looking at other models, as well as reflecting back on why we decided to have the format, starting with the name Laydeez. So Sarah and I were familiar, particularly with Trina Robbins' work, and she led women's comics with the all-women comics collective of 10 artists. All this activity was happening in California in the 1970s, underground comics activity. So Trina Robbins used the word girl, ironically, 20 years before it was, in advance, and it became, I was familiar with Grrrl, where a few R's are added, the misspelling, which happened during the 90s, and it's that idea of anger, protest. But I felt that wasn't quite us, because we were a bit older. So I think the ease is an exasperated sigh of, have we still not got there yet? So I was still thinking about the idea of why lady and why not girl, and was thinking about girl power and ladies. And I quite like this quote about the use of ladies, which again reflects that Sarah and I were a bit further on. We weren't just high school, you know, we weren't at that adolescent anger. Oh yeah. I don't think it's going to play, so I might have to sing it. I don't know the words. You know that song. If you want to be my lover. So I was really familiar with that. And then I was thinking, I've always had a little problem with the Spice Girls, this idea of girl power. And I was, on my periphery, also aware of the riot Grrrls. So everyone knows, I knew the Spice Girls, I knew that anthem was always playing. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? What the hell was that about? So I was thinking, why girl power? And the radio was on in the background one day last year when I was working, and there was this interview with Bratmobile, which was a riot girl band, and the interviewer was saying, oh yes, well of course Spice Girls and the power and the girl power, and one of the members went, oh, Spice Girls, hot girl power, like that, and I was thinking, yeah, I'm right, there's something odd going on. So luckily there's been quite a bit of documentation the last year or so about riot girls, because they were a lot bigger in America, and they did come to the UK, and it happened very differently here, but I wasn't familiar. It wasn't on my radar the way the Spice Girls was. So I looked up girl power, and it's used as a term for neo-feminist empowerment. Neo, supposedly being new. Neo-feminist. So I thought, neo-Nazi, neo-liberalism, neo-feminist just doesn't work. So again, it's that slight disjunction, really. So I wondered about, would the Spice Girls have existed without Riot Girl? Riot Girl came first, and then from America to England, and the Spice Girls happened in England and were phenomenally successful, and then went back to the US and were phenomenally successful in the US. So there's this crossover. Oh, I forgot to say also in that anthem of, back to the song I sang earlier, if you want my future, forget my past. So basically that song that I sang you, if the guy wants a chance with the girl, he has to like her friends, because friendship is the all-important. That was the message from the Spice Girls. But as Caitlin Moran says in her book, How to Be a Woman, what about the sisterhood? When did feminism become confused with Buddhism? For Moran, feminism is about equality, all the rest is just hassle. So basically, I think what happened with the Spice Girls is they used the collective power not to create change, but to shop. So what happened was it was an industrialization of the Riot Girls' spirit, enabling them. So this wasn't feminism so much as a girl-targeted consumerism. So whereas the Riot Girls was music was their main form, but it interested me to look at it further because they used zines very actively as a way of promoting when the bands were playing and what was happening. So if you couldn't, and it was the DIY punk ethos was very much there, so you just played a band, it didn't matter if you weren't skilled in that punk way, and also if you couldn't play a musical instrument, you made a zine. So it was all that channeling energies into creative consumption. Whereas with the Spice Girl following, you had the same gathering of energies from groups of young women, quite angry or confused, but it was all being channeled into buying merchandise. What a waste. So the problem with girl power Spice Girl was not the girl, but the power. The addition of power implies that the girl isn't powerful enough on its own. And it made me think of the key point that Betty Friedan was making in The Feminine Mystique, was her question, why is it never said that the really crucial function, the really important role that women serve as housewives is to buy more things for the house? After all, the business of America is business. So what Friedan was also saying was this channeling of, educated, competent housewives during the 60s and 60s was persuaded into buying goods for the kitchen to make them feel that they were putting creativity into their baking with these fancy goods. And it's a little bit like what happened with the Spice Girl following. What really I liked also about looking into the Riot Girls was their use of text and image. So this is an iconic image from the Riot Girl movement that was in ID, a British pop magazine, ID magazine in 1993. But there was one of the main bands was Bikini Kill, and the main singer would come on stage with a bra with slut written across her stomach. So she's inviting the audience what they might want to see in a sort of semi-naked, sexy woman, and what they might think in one fell semiotic swoop. And I liked the idea that that's working as the comic, that we can have in one panel, you can have an image and text saying two opposite things, and working in that way visually. So, and I think if we're here as scholars of comics, we need to look beyond the obvious comics, and look towards ideas like this of text and image more widely. Anyway, the more I've read about the Riot Girls, the more I've seen similarities with what's happening in Laydeez Do Comics. Have I 2 minutes to just run through? 2 minutes. The personal is where Sarah and I started from, and the personal was very much where the Riot Girls started from too. They formed groups that met. One of the criticisms that came up from Riot Girl members was that when they met in their groups, there almost was a hierarchy about who could have the most miserable story, gave you more status. And what with Laydeez Do Comics slightly diffuses that is our guests. We do have guests who are talking about their traumas, often for the first time, and it's often tearful that they're then working on graphic novels to channel these experiences. But we also have academics presenting, and we also have filmmakers, writers, who are contextualizing why we're using the personal story. Community that has always been very important since the beginning. We've realised, for Sarah and myself, often graphic novelists work in isolation, and by bringing people together, we found that it gives us all confidence. And that's what happened with the Riot Girls as well. They formed a community by meeting together. Democracy, the Riot Girls brought more established punk bands. The Raincoats came and played alongside newly forming bands, so giving that balance and that inspiration both ways. The Raincoats were really inspired by that. So at Laydeez Do Comics, we've had some high up there people who are our gods for me and Sarah, presenting next to someone who's just started drawing their ideas. And it's inspired both ways. And we use the question the way the Riot Girl groups started with a round the group question, but it didn't go further in their groups. It just focused, I think, from what I've read, on the question, whereas for Laydeez Do Comics, the purpose of the question is to ensure that everyone feels they're participating, as well as a little taste of what the speakers go through with the nerves. A lady, we talked about the use of lady. When Riot Girl developed, they put on Lady Fests. So again, they took on that word. And branches. Riot Girls went berserk with branches all over the place, and Laydeez Do Comics is starting now to have branches. The difference is age. The Riot Girls started a movement that started from adolescents, women coming into their 20s, with a frustration about not being able to voice what they were going through and feeling. And I wonder if Laydeez Do Comics is a slightly higher, older end of women who are perhaps 30s, 40s, perhaps in a situation where they're not sure of their voice. Perhaps, a lot of people who come may not have children and may be feeling that all the circle, they're surrounded with people in a very conventional setting or so on. And so, again, we're forming our voice for that age. PR and media was shunned a bit by the Riot Girls. They had a fear of it, and perhaps it's different again in the US to UK. Sarah and I, here are media sluts. Because again, it's about why we're thinking Laydeez Do Comics is a way could expand to have transformative impact on a wider level. And the internet was in its infancy in the 90s when the Riot Girl movement was starting, so it would probably have been very different now. So my conclusion is, again, by looking at Spice Girls and Riot Girls, that idea of cultural, the problems inherent in taking from one culture to another. And there's no conclusion, I'm just starting on this, but it's, I'm throw it to you, but I quite like this quote, that I think what Laydeez do comics, to just touch on the generation aspect of transfer, what the Riot Girls and what Trina Robbins and so on, women in California were about, it was very much about protests. They had to be in the 70s and even the 90s, but I think where feminism has become now, it might not be about protest in that way, because the role of women is already is entranced in our society further on, so it might not be. Yeah. Anyway, to really finish, so then tonight we're having our first Glasgow Laydeez do comics. It'd be lovely to see any of you there.